Okay, good evening, good night, good morning, depending on how you're joining us today. Welcome to this masterclass about immersive and engaging learning experience. I'm Ignacio Gafo. I'm the Associate Dean at I Business School, I University for what's called blended programs, so programs that are combining online with face-to-face. I'm also a professor of marketing. And in the next hour, what I would like to do is to discuss with you what does it take to come up with immersive and engaging learning experiences. As you know, you have a chat where you can pose your questions, so feel free to ask whatever you want. I will try to run the presentation in 40 minutes approximately, and then we will have circa 20 minutes to take any question you may want to address. So let me start with this. Okay, so let me start with what was happening not so long ago. Actually, in this case, I'm saying a long time ago, but this was probably close to 1 year ago, 11 months ago. So before COVID. Okay, so if we go back to last January, okay, and if I could be giving you the same lecture I'm giving today, probably this is what I would be telling you, right? I would be speaking about education, and I will be calling on a tsunami which is coming, and actually different professors researchers have been speaking about this. As you can see, this is from Stanford, and that was 2012. And everybody's speaking about this. No, and again, this is pre-COVID. No, hey, something big is really coming. You have to be prepared. And actually, I could also speak to you 11 months ago about all the technologies that were supposed to be impacting education, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, data analytics, you call it, right? But this was basically the message I could be sharing with you. And I could be telling you, you know what? Technologies are impacting education. We have a huge amount of educational apps, okay, that are gonna transform and disrupt everything which is coming. And probably I would tell you, I would ask you this question, where do you stand in your organization in terms of education? Do you feel more like this, a very traditional, as you can see, a lecturing educational model, or do you want to go to the other extreme, right? In this case, you are really, really into the new technologies, trying to disrupt everything upside down. No, so probably the question I could have asked you 11 months ago is this. No, I could have framed it like this: something becoming, technologies are here. And well, the big question is, where do you stand? Where is your organization standing today? So this was before this happened, right? And as you know, COVID changed things completely upside down. And that's basically what we're going to discuss. What's going on today and what's going to come in the future once we are over with this. Um, and that's a very big question, because today all the educational industry is struggling, right? And we have a lot of questions today. Our classes are empty or are close to being empty because of COVID. We had to move everything online. It's been a huge happening. And that's basically what I would like to share with you, to discuss with you today. Let me share my vision about what's happening with COVID. And I don't think this is only about education, but clearly it's also the case here. What COVID is doing, and that's my perspective, is not so much changing things. What COVID is doing is accelerating some of the big trends we had before. And this is a very, very interesting thought, okay? And I'm going to speak about this, what's happening in a moment. But this is a very important message. The good thing about this, or the interesting thing about COVID, is things that would have taken, I don't know, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, have been happening in a question of months. Think, for instance, about what has happened with workforce. We've been speaking for many, many years, about the possibilities of working remotely, working from home, and then all of a sudden we are all forced to move to online work. And the same thing with education, right? I think what we are experiencing here is things that were latent, things that were happening, things that were going to take place in a question of years. All of a sudden, because of COVID, they have been incredibly accelerated. And when we analyze this, I think it's extremely important, that we make a proper analysis, okay, about what's going on and what is really being accelerated here. And we have to be careful, right? Because there's a lot of analysis and opinions here, but I don't think they are really dealing with the core of the problem. And the core of the problem is not so much about technology adoption as I introduced in the beginning, or no. The main problem we are probably dealing with today in education is we have what I call a generation clash in education. And here you have basically different profiles, no? And you're going to fit into one of them, right? We can speak about baby boomers up to 1960, or what's called Generation X after 1961 till 1980, or Generation Y, millennials from 1991 to 1995. And finally, we have other generation called Generation Z, or digital natives, which are those born after 1995 till, I have to say, 2010. After 2010, we have a new generation called Alpha, which I'm not analyzing today. Probably these people are too young, but these people are coming. And what's happening to us today in education, especially in higher education or in companies, is we are managing these four profiles at the same time, right? We have baby boomers, okay, that as you can see, they prefer to be addressed through written communications. Or you can speak to Generation X, where we have probably most of our executive programs. This is the profile we have, right? Which is more eager to be communicated through phone calls. Or millennials, in this case, is the email generation, right? And a big chunk of the students we have in higher education are fitting into this, and actually new employees are probably to a large extent here. And we have Generation Z, okay, which are newcomers. They're doing bachelors, or they're, yeah, the young people we might be hiring in our companies. As you can see, in this case, they want something more immediate than emails, okay? They want to be texted. And that's a big problem we have here, because the generations have nothing to do one with another. I'm going to go into the detail. And the problem we have is we have to adapt. We have to review how we are addressing education, because we are dealing with very different people. Here you have some interesting information, and you can tell the big differences we have one over the other. So if you just pick up on the last one, which has to do with consumption. Look at that. No, it's in the case of Generation X, they're pretty much materialistic, right? They're competitive, they're individualistic. Okay, and they want things that are going to reinforce the status. If I compare that with millennials are pretty much around global mindset, and they like experience and parties and festivals. And Generation Z, it's very different again from what we are dealing with millennials. They are pretty much people that are looking for their own identity, and they're looking for something that makes them unique, or feel that they have unlimited possibilities, and they're pretty much into some ethical issues. And obviously this is connected to the context each one of us have been living, right? So we have been grown up in very different scenarios, and probably the way we behave, we think, we feel, has nothing to do. And again, the melting pot we have today in education is we are not separating one from another. We have all of them in the same place, so we have to think about how to address them. It's very interesting to me, and probably you also know a lot of people, okay, that are telling you, you know what, don't worry. When this is over, I mean, we will hopefully find a vacuum soon for a coronavirus, right? And when things are back to normal, we will be able to take our regular classes. And believe me, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen because the root cause is not so much the pandemic. The root cause is not so much that we are not able to attend classes physically. No, the root cause is far beyond that. It's more deep, and it has to do with the generation class I'm referring to. And obviously, if we want to make this model work, the challenge we have, and this is why it's so challenging, it's so interesting, on the other hand, is one size does not fit all. And that's exactly what we are trying to do. Think about that. Think about the approach we've followed up in education in general. We have kept the same model for probably 300 years. We have introduced small variations. No, probably now what we are doing is we are Zooming classes. No, we are moving classes into Zoom. But again, the underlying assumption we are making, which is a ridiculous one, if you think about that, is one size is not going to fit all. We have to think, we have to be aware about the different generations we are dealing with, the different profiles that they have. So let me share with you some insight. No, and that's probably the first thing we have to do. No, we have to understand very well what are the differences and what does it imply from an educational perspective, from a learning perspective. So the first thing you may want to think about is the leadership style that these people appreciate. Okay, and this is going to be connected to the kind of professor or faculty you're going to get. No, as you can see, leadership styles for Generation X is about coordinating. They want someone that is going to help them to coordinate. Millennials are not going to take this. Millennials want someone that guides them, and Generation Z is looking for someone that actually empowers them. Okay, it's not enough just to be guided. I want to be empowered. I want someone that takes out the best out of me. Or the ideal leader, as you can see, we are moving from a doer, that's what's happening with Generation X, to someone who is a supporter, that's for millennials. And Generation Z, young generations we are dealing with in education today, they look for someone that can collaborate with them. As you can see, there's a big question about authority here. Look at this. This has to do with how we approach, different generations approach problem solving. Generation X is very individualistic. Okay, so what they want to do is they want to be provided with the right tools so that they can decide on their own. They want to be very independent. Millennials are not okay with this. Millennials are going to look for something which is much more collaborative. So they want to resolve the problem together with whoever is raising that question or that problem. And the last piece the Generation Z is not only collaborative, they're also going to look for something which is inclusiveness. So it's not enough just to collaborate. You want to make sure these people, that everybody on the table is going to be involved. And again, I cannot take one approach, which is what I have today with Generation X, which is pretty much independent, and think it's going to work with the other generations, with millennials and Generation Z. And if you stop for a second, that's exactly what's happening today in class. We take one approach and we believe it's going to work for everybody. I think about decision making, how decisions are going to be done. No? So Generation X, in the end of the day, you want to make your own decision. You might involve the team, but it's your decision. Millennials is about deciding with the team. Okay, so whatever we discuss and we agree, that's what we're going to stick for. And Generation Z wants to go one step beyond, no? Because they want a consensus in the team when they make decisions. So again, these are very profound differences that we have to acknowledge. Actually, if I move forward, now I concentrate more into education or learning process. Okay, as you can see, again, we have significant differences over generations. Baby boomers, that's a long time ago, they were thinking about development. Education was a very powerful tool that they had for developing themselves. Generation X is pretty much about status, and that's what you can find in premium programs all around the world. But look at this, millennials are more into experience. That's what they're looking for. So unless you make the learning process something which is experience and something which is personal for them, they're not going to take it. Or Generation Z, they don't want actual experiences. What they want is discovery. They want to find themselves. And actually, the way we learn, each generation is learning, again, very big differences, right? Old days, it was about reading and reflecting. Generation X, it's about demonstrating, discussing. This is what we usually do in business schools, right? Which is case method. But millennials are not going to take it. No, millennials want to have participatory learning. They want to be very, very involved in the learning. And actually, I guess if you are doing some teaching, you will see this. They want to have a say in everything. And Generation Z, as you can see, again, we can find some differences. And this is very interesting, no? They're much more open, for instance, for self-study, for some stuff, no? Also, they want participatory learning, but it's okay for them to be self-trained. Okay, this is the generation which is used to YouTube, etc. So that's also very, very big differences we have. And the teaching approach, again, has to be adapted. And what works for one is not going to work for the other. Most schools, most learning institutions, we're pretty much into what's termed for Generation X, which is kind of independent. We submit some materials. Until some extent, we try to make some level of participation. This is not adequate for millennials, as you can see, because in their mindset, you have to do it in a different way. What they're expecting from you is to make it collaborative and networked, right? They want to go, for instance, this is very interesting, right? They want to go beyond the class. They want to be connected to the community. That's extremely important for them. And actually, they want to learn together with other people. Generation Z, as you can see, again, we have a class. these people are much more independent. Okay, for some things they want to be on their own. They want to be network all day. No, but certainly these people are very, very collaborative. Okay, so they want their own space, but when they are with other people, they're very keen on being collaborative. Okay, so what's going to happen here is, as you can see, if we stick to what works for Generation X and try to apply to the other two generations, this is not going to work at all. And the case for teaching, well, Generation X, as you can see, it's pretty much on being efficient and flexible. No, I want to focus on what's really relevant, and I want to give you as many options as possible. Actually, if you check out what's happening in quite a few universities, business school, that's what we promote, right? We are going to give you a lot of flexibility, and we're going to optimize. We promise you it's going to be very efficient. But this is not working for other generations. Millennials, they really want to experiment. They love it. They love it, and they want to try out things, no, and they want to realize by themselves what works, what doesn't work. These people are pretty much, as we said before, around the experience. Learning has to be experience. They can feel something which is personal for them. And Generation Z, as you can see, again, we have changes over the previous one. These people are pretty much into active learning, so to some extent connected to the previous one, but these people are pretty much into doing. They want to play with things, see things by themselves, and realize by themselves. Another thing which is very interesting for this generation, and this is a very big difference over the previous one, is these people are expecting. Okay, this is not something they intend to have. It's something they expect. What's called digital guides or tools. Okay, so they're very familiarized with learning assets, videos, learning materials, etc., and they're expecting each one of us to deliver them, especially when we are just providing them with simple content. Okay, so again, we have very big changes coming. Even if we focus on millennials, big new generations are gonna change things a lot. Look at feedback. Now that's a question that we usually have. How often, what sort of feedback should I provide? No, all generations, probably some of us identify with this. It was once per year should be okay. No, or no news, good news. Generation X is something different. They expect some sort of periodic feedback. Okay, so they want maybe once a year, twice a year. They want it to be very, very well established. But millennials are more demanding. No, millennials are not going to accept this. They're going to ask for things on demand. So whenever I want your feedback, I want to be able to ask for it and demand it. And look at this Generation Z. Generation Z is asking for continuous, a constant feedback. And reflect with me now for a second about how this is impacting education, how it's impacting the learning delivery that we are doing. Very, very big changes. We cannot really generalize, no? Oh, look at this. Now I'm going to speak about this in a second. What's going on with technology? Baby boomers was an interesting one, no? They view technology as something threatening. I don't feel comfortable with that. Generation X is probably much more utilitarian. So look, as long as I can see a clear benefit from what you are giving to me with technology, I'm going to accept it. Okay, I'm not especially crazy about that. Okay, but I'm going to be open to it. Millennials, as you can see, is comfortable with this. They're okay. They really like and appreciate technology in education. But look at this. No, Generation Z is actually one step beyond, and it's a natural extension of themselves. It's inconceivable, if you like, in other words, for them, that we are not incorporating a technology in our education. That's basically what's happening here. So this is the root problem, no? And this is what I really think that is happening today. And again, it's been fostered, it's being accelerated um, by coronavirus. We have a generational class, okay? And this is the big question, the big challenge we have, how do we make sense out of this? How we come up with an educational system that works for Generation X, Generation Y, and Generation Z? That's the big question we have. And my proposal, and I will share with you how we manage, is you need to adapt. You need to adapt. And then one approach for everybody is not going to work. We have an expression here in Spain, which is coffee for everybody, which is assuming that everybody is going to like black coffee, for instance. And this is not possible anymore. Okay, or if you like, this is the perfect recipe for disaster. It's going to be a clash. This is not something you can really apply. Having said this, and I think at this point it should be clear to all of us what's the big dilemma we have. And the big dilemma, as you saw, is we are dealing with very different generations that are behaving in very different ways, learn with different approaches, and have very different expectations. In any case, a question that I always get is, okay, if this is the case, okay, how about engagement? How can I really work with engagement? Because engagement seems to be the key for learning. Let me clarify something based on my experience and also based on research. Okay, so um, engagement by itself is not necessarily leading to good learning. Engagement is going to lead to probably active students, but engagement in itself is not going to help us to attain the learning objectives we want. Let me give you an example. So something which is very popular today, something which everybody speaks about, for instance, our videos, right? So you've heard about that. You know, new generations are incredibly visual. They're pretty much into videos. So one temptation we may have is, look, I'm going to forget about traditional lectures. I'm going to move everything into a pool of videos. Okay, so I'm going to change my classes, my traditional classes with, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 videos, okay, that I'm going to ask my students to check out. And guess what's going to happen? According to research, the learning is very poor. Okay, if you play it like that, because by themselves, videos are not really leading to learning. Videos are probably good for passing on simple knowledge to keep people entertained, but this is not the case. What's my point here? My point here is when we speak about learning, we're speaking about education. I think there is a process that we have to follow. Okay, and when we follow this process, things like engagement will make sense. Okay, and will definitely boost the sort of learning we are providing our learners, our students with. So the process should start, as I mentioned, with the student profile. And in this case, we have to consider, okay, what is the profile I'm dealing with? Is it mainly Generation X? Is it mainly millennials? Is it mainly Generation Z? That's the first thing I have to think about. Then I have to move into learning outcome. Then I have to think about what sort of learning experience and level of engagement I want to get. What's the right one? Then I'm going to move into the right pedagogies. And finally, I'm going to look for the technologies that are adequate, that are a good fit for what I'm going to have. So I'm going to go one by one to debrief you about this process. But again, in the end of the day, this is exactly what we have to do. And probably what you have in front of you is going to be valid. It's been valid for many, many years. And I really think it's going to help you with whatever comes next. Okay. So student profile, the first thing we said is, okay, we have to acknowledge the differences we have. Okay, and probably this is not going to be black or white, right? We're going to have a blend of things, a blend of people, and that's what we have to understand. That this is what we have to do. Okay, what works for these people? And probably you will say you need to do a lot of adjustments. It requires a lot of flexibility from learning institutions, from faculty, from everybody who is working on the design and delivery of the programs. And then, of course, we have to continue with the learning outcomes. What do I want to get? Okay, and here you have a classic model, okay, that probably most of you are using, which is the Bloom's taxonomy. So I have to think carefully. Okay, what kind of knowledge do I want to get? Is it basic knowledge? Do I want to work on comprehension, on application, on analysis, on synthesis, evaluation, or creation? And my point with this is very relevant because depending on what we're going to do, one pedagogy or other is going to be efficient. So if I go back to my example about the videos are probably, as I advance, very good for knowledge transfer. If I want to convey a very simple concepts before the class, probably videos are going to do the job. However, if I want to go deeper, if I want to speak about analysis or synthesis or even creation, probably the sort of pedagogies I have to do are different. Okay, so I start with the profile. That's the very first thing. And the second thing I have to do is, okay, based on that profile and based on the learning outcomes, okay, how shall I play it? The third thing would be the learning experience and this sort of engagement. A learning experience, there's a lot of research happening today, right, about a customer experience. And I would say it's pretty much applicable to the learning experience. One of the common mistakes we have when we manage customer experiences is we We manage customer experience by silos, right? We break it to different pieces and we try to provide the best for each silo we are dealing with. And this is a very big mistake because what we lose if we do that is we lose the entire picture. And I think it's essential, no? When we come up with um, programs, courses, training, we have to think, okay, what's the learning experience like? What sort of learning experience do we really want to deliver? And obviously, this has to be connected with the student profile. Because again, if I pick up, for instance, millennials, they're going to be pretty much into something very experiential. Okay, or if I pick up Generation Z, they're going to appreciate, being on their own and being collaborating with other people. And if I pick up Generation X, the sort of experiences should be very practical and very independent. And then, of course, once you have that clear, you may want to think about introduce differences per courses. So it's not the same teaching, for instance, leadership than teaching something very analytical or teaching something that requires very abstract thinking. Okay, and of course, we also have to think is okay if I'm going for a massive deployment, do I want to introduce or not variations across professors? Do I want to give a professor some freedom or not? Okay, and here you can find all sorts of approaches. No, some schools like Harvard, for instance, they're very consistent. So they ask professors basically to deliver the same stuff. Other institutions are much more relaxed. Okay, but in the end of the day, the main point to me is okay, what sort of learning experience do you want to provide? Do you want to provide your students with? That should be the key here. And now we move into engagement, okay? And again, once for making this work, and I'm going to give you some tips based on my experience about what's working throughout different generations, we have to get the previous things right, okay? And as you might recall, it's about identifying the profile, identify the learning outcome, and defining the right learning experience. So once we are clear about this, then we can move into engagement. And things that from my experience could help you today throughout different generations are the following. Very important principle to start with. It could be active learning. Active learning, I guess you are familiarized with the concept, but let me speak about it briefly anyway. Active learning has to do with making sure that learners, students, are taking responsibility about what they are learning. Okay, so it's not like the old days when I went to school, right, where you just went to school to take notes. Okay, the professor was telling you exactly what you should do, what you should not do, what you should cover. No, that's not working anymore today. We have to make people responsible for their education. Okay, so they have to take an active role in whatever they do. Okay, professor is going to help, is going to support, but this is a very starting point. No, people should be accountable. Doesn't matter to me the age that they have about their learning. The second thing, which I think it makes a very big difference, especially with millennials and with Generation Z, is you need to insist, you need to explain very well why are you studying things, even for Generation X, right? So it's important that they say, okay, why is this important? Why is this relevant? How is it going to work in real life? How is it going to make the difference? And a third thing which is connected to this is not only understanding the usefulness. For instance, I can speak to you about a cash flow, and probably you will get very quickly why cash flow is relevant in real life. If you're dealing with finance or you're doing an evaluation of a company, but also you have to go on a personal level. And especially with millennials, with Generation Z, you have to explain to them, look, you're taking responsibility, this is relevant, and this is how it's going to help you. So in this case, for instance, if I go back to my example about cash flow, I also need to tell you or to explain to you how this is going to make you wealthier or how you're going to make better decisions um, based on understanding cash flow. Smart feedback, it could be the fourth thing. And as you could see, we have a lot of variations here, right? Depending on the profile, right? And I think here we have to find the right balance, no? Because probably if I could be giving the feedback that students demand, I could not do anything else but providing feedback, which is not very realistic. So smart feedback means it's about finding the right way to make people feel that they are getting the right feedback. And of course, there are different ways of doing this. Okay, so of course I can do feedback on a structured way, which is, hey guys, I'm not going to give you feedback, I'm going to do it maybe after session 5 or after session 6, no news, good news before. Okay, so by doing this, as you can see, I'm structuring the feedback, but also I can complement this with other tools. Okay, so for instance, something which is happening today is thanks to artificial intelligence or some kind of application technology. I can provide real-time feedback. No? So I can give, for instance, students quizzes, okay, that they can take and they can get immediate feedback about whether the response is right, is not right, how it's going. No, or something which is related to this is about gamification. Gamification is applying principles. No, so smart feedback would be, for instance, telling the student, look, you have covered this. This is 20% of the entire course. So this is how much progress you have done. Or other things you can see today is when you ask students giving feedback to students. Okay, so you basically provide students with rubrics. Okay, so that they have the kind of guidance for giving the feedback, and these students will give feedback to their colleagues. Also, something that's for feedback. Okay, so we have to find the right balance. Again, we have to make people comfortable, but also we have a lot of tools that are going to help us making the process more efficient. Another thing that I think it's extremely important is we have to empower people. That helps a lot with engagement. Empowered could be about reinforcing. It can be about facilitating, can be about clarifying, but this is very, very important. And actually, it's my own experience recently. For instance, in one of my electives, which is B2B marketing, I have some junior students, they don't feel very comfortable with the course because it's very technical for them. And what I did in this case is I did some sort of follow-up sessions with some of them that I knew they were struggling, and I reinforced, I make them say how they were capable of dealing with complex and very technical things, and once people feel empowered, they will boom. They will boom. Another thing which is working a lot on engagement. I don't know if you've seen The Mandalorian. So this is from the first chapter from the second session. Um, and at this point in the story, okay, what you have is a very good example of competition. And competition, as you know, is when you compete and you collaborate. Okay, so something you could do, something that works very, very well for new generations, also for old ones, I would say, is when you make them collaborate. So maybe, for instance, what you do is you make them work in groups. Okay, and what you do in class, for instance, is you make them compete against different groups. Okay, so at the same time, as you can see, what you are doing is you are promoting collaboration, but also you're giving them an edge, right? Because you make them compete. So competition is something I really, really encourage. And something that makes a lot of sense. Very big thing also that I think it's extremely interesting is has to do with customization. Customization is making it personal, making it adapted. And something you can do here is you can use something which is very advanced. Okay, so you can use some advanced educational software for doing this, or you can do it in very simple ways. Okay, a simple way maybe just, for instance, to run some surveys or some checks, okay, before the class, so that when you go through the class, okay, you can really personalize because you have very personal insight from different people, and then you leverage that. So again, the customization can go very deep. You can make it simple, but this is something we have to work on. And three other things that I think are useful, okay, and are going to help you with promoting engagement. The first thing, which I would say, has to do with visuals. It's not a question about debating if it's good or bad. That's a reality. The new generations, millennials, Generation Z, are extremely visual. Okay, so you have to make sure that you're making it visual in terms of videos or images, etc. Okay, but long tests, etc., probably very few people are gonna read them. Another things that you may want to do that I think it's important for engagement. I'm gonna go through this in a second. Is you have to introduce quite a few pedagogies in the same class, in the same session. And why is this? Because new generations get bored very, very easily. Okay, and probably you've seen that, no? That goes down very, very quickly. So one way to combat this is basically by moving them, no, from one thing to another very, very quickly. So maybe in the same session, for instance, I could be using different stuff, okay, just to make sure everybody's engaged. And the last piece, okay, and this is something we learned from marketing, but also perfectly applicable to education. It has to do with the wow effect, which means if you're able to surprise your students, uh, that's going to make a very, very big impact. No? So for instance, something I personally do, just to give you an example, I make quizzes in class where I ask everybody to respond, okay, that are providing with unexpected responses, no, something which is not what the good everybody thinks. No? For instance, is customer satisfaction related to long-term customer growth? And then you can elaborate. But it's very important, no, that you have the ability to surprise. Okay, you have to break with the routine, as you can say. Which one is more important than the others? I think it's a combination of all these. No, and you have to think about, okay, how does it work? What's the right combination? How do I make this work throughout my organization? Okay, and probably in terms of training, what you have to do is you have to educate your professors, your faculty about, well, this is the class, this is what's working, and these are the different tools that we may want to explore. And then if I move on, because this is not the end of the story, as I said, okay, that was only about learning, experience, and engagement. Then we have to look for pedagogies and we have to look for the right technology. So as I told you before, when we speak about pedagogies, it's very, very important that we combine them, you know. So there's not a killer pedagogy. I don't think that's the case. So people get bored. Let me give you an example. So people, for instance, love games. You know, and in our institution, for instance, we have a lot of games. And what we have realized is that if you give too many games to people, they get bored. So you have to combine things. Obviously, this has to be connected to the learning objectives. And I would encourage here you to make a scientific use of the pedagogies you are using. No, and again, some things are not going to be obvious to you. And also something which I think is very, very important is we have to be very agile in the sense that we have to try out quite a few things. And believe me, things are not going to work from the very beginning. Moving forward, okay, of course, then we have to decide on technology, and technology, it can certainly help. And I think we have a lot of examples here. I'm just sharing with you some things you could do. I think we have a lot of interaction tools, okay, on top of what's Zoom today. Okay, so technology is definitely helping us to introduce very advanced video conference like the ones you have in at the top, which is what we call the war room here at IE, could be something like the hybrid classroom that you have below, and quite a few institutions are moving into this. But also we have tools, no, for exploring. Exploring could be multimedia materials, could be videos, it could be, for instance, simulations like the one you have in the screen, or you can make it more immersive. Okay, you can play with virtual reality. No, that's something we use, for instance, here for showcasing to students what could be a virus, a digital viral attack. Okay, or you can play with games. And the last thing, which I think is going to make a lot of difference with customization, is what I refer to as learning analytics. Now the good thing about technology is we can gather an incredible amount of information from students. And obviously, if we leverage this can help us to not only customize the experience, we can even move into what's called adaptive learning. And as you know, adaptive learning has to do with that. Depending on the profile and what we see from the students, we will go one direction or another. But again, this should be the last thing we have to think about. You know, once we are clear about the previous things, then we move. And now let me spend 5 minutes, 8 minutes sharing with you what we are doing at IE, and something that I think it's going to be interesting for you, which is what we call the liquid learning, which is a sort of application of everything I mentioned before. I don't know if you know IE University, but anyway, IE University started as a business school. In our case, we're from Spain. We've been for quite a few years in online. Okay, we combine online with face-to-face classes. Okay, so we are highly ranked in most of the rankings, as you can see, for online MBA programs, also for executive MBA programs. Okay, so we have, anyway, that's my point, a lot of knowledge in online and face-to-face. Probably before COVID, our case was everything was separated. No, we had our traditional face-to-face programs, and we had our part-time programs, which were more into online. And the challenge we had was, well, as you know, COVID showed up. It was kind of brutal what happened in Spain, and we had to close the campus immediately. In a question of 2 weeks, we had to close the campus, the physical campus. No, but we also had to provide with continuity. And we have a STAR program, which is called the full-time MBA in our course. In our case, we call it International MBA, and we had a very big issue, in terms of processes, because we had to move everything from face-to-face to online. Students that were expecting face-to-face delivery, and faculty that, well, they had an idea about online, but probably they were not that comfortable. So as you can see, we had to close in a question of 2 weeks, and the objective we set was, okay, I want to move into online in 2 weeks. What we came up with, okay, it's a new philosophy that I think is going to be replicated in quite a few institutions, which is what we call the liquid learning. Liquid learning is something that came up from top management in our case. And basically what we are trying to do with liquid learning is two things. We want to provide the best learning experience and also provide you with the flexibility that you need. Because right now, probably you don't know, for instance, if you're coming to class or not. Okay, so the philosophy is, look, it doesn't matter to me if you're connected online or if you're coming to campus, we're going to provide you with the right learning. And what we are going to do is we're going to look for the right pedagogy and the right technology, depending on the learning objective. Okay, and we're going to do that, and we're going to make sure that what we're delivering to you is really flexible. And as you can see, this is something like marketing, right? In marketing, for many years, we were speaking about the differences between face-to-face, traditional marketing, online marketing, and now everybody speaks about omni-channel. Everything has to be combined. And our view is, for education, it has to be exactly the same. I don't think it makes sense to make the distinction between online and face-to-face. Everything has to be integrated and coordinated. And probably here you have a summary about how we are approaching it, no? Which is aligned to or connected to what we saw before. You have to start with the strategic objectives. What do you want to do with your new pedagogical model? In our cases, we want to optimize learning. We want to provide with flexibility. Then we are defining the learning objectives, and then we are moving into different sort of sessions on learning tools, no? Just to make this happen. And just to give you a very clear idea about what we are doing with liquid learning throughout all our programs, as you can see, we are breaking the mold here. And what we are trying to do is we are speaking about different sorts of sessions, no? That's what we have. So we have the traditional synchronous classes that are not traditional anymore, because what we are coming up with is with hybrid classes. So people can join remotely or people can join face-to-face in campus. That's one option. That's a pool of the sessions that we have. But we don't stop here, right? Because also what we do is we combine this with advanced synchronous online classes. Here you have an example of what we call the Wow Room, which is an advanced technology platform that we created for that. Or for instance, for case discussion, something we are using a lot is online discussions. Okay, so we open discussion threads, or we make use of we leverage a lot of social media. And of course, we have to include as well here experiential learning. Some people really like it, and I think that for some things, for instance, leadership, it's extremely important. And finally, what we are working very hard now is on introducing online learning, okay, which is basically, if you like, learning assets, learning things that you can study on your own. And the approach, and that's the main thing to me, it's not about one or the other. What's going to make the difference, what's going to make the model really liquid for you is when you combine all of this, okay? And you have to follow the process, and then you will see what's working here. And the same thing would happen with technology. And as you can see, we are using very different things here, okay? And the main benefit is not so much the technology in itself, but how we are applying it. So for discussions, we are using, in this case, as you can see, multimedia cases. That's something you can get. Or we are introducing applications like feedback fruits. That's very good application for making your discussions more dynamic. Or if we want to make it more interactive, okay, we're introducing things like Kahoot or Lego Serious Play, just to give you an idea. Or if you want to make it immersive, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce games. Or if we want to make it much more down to earth, very, very applicable, what we do is we do a lot of project-based learning or business challenges. In our case, what we do is we bring companies that pose a challenge, and then we get people working on them. And the last piece would have to do with digital assets, digital learning assets. And this could be multimedia notes, or could be videos where different professors speak about different things in 3-5 minutes, okay? And again, the main benefit for this is the combination of all of that, okay? It's not gonna work if you stick to one session and one is sort of technology or one pedagogy here. What's working, what's making the approach liquid and works is the combination of all of it. We started rolling this out last April. I would say so far the results have been very promising, very positive. Still, obviously, this is a work in progress. This is something we are fine-tuning. And just to conclude, okay, before I move into questions, let me follow this. The main important thing is not about the technology. The main thing is about uh, following the process you have in front of you. The starting point should be the student profile. In this case, the different generations we are dealing with. We all have to think about the learning outcome. Then we have to move into the learning experience and the sort of engagement we want to provide. And then what we are going to do is we're going to look for the right pedagogies and the right technology fit. So yes, it's a question about, in the end of the day, managing properly the different generations. I think in this case, my suggestion is to be very practical. This is what we have to do. This is what we have to deal with. And probably we need to be much more flexible in education. And only, I would say, learning institutions that are flexible are going to be the ones that are going to survive, no? And be very practical. Okay, I don't think this is a philosophical discussion. This is new generations we have to deal with. And probably my last tip to you could be, look, to a large extent, it's very, very important that we keep on trying out things. No, I don't think anyone has the recipe, the Saint Grail. So probably trial and error is going to be very, very important. And on top of this, the last thing is we have to keep a very open mind. No, things are changing at an incredible speed. Just think about your kids, think about the employees you have at your work. We have to be up to it. Now, in education, for many many centuries, actually, we have been very slow in terms of moving forward. I think we don't have a choice but to keep on moving. All right, so that's gonna be it for this masterclass. I don't know if you have any questions. If you have any question, please write down your question on the application, and I will take your questions. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any question from your side. Anyway, if you want to contact me, maybe you can contact me through Twitter. There you have my Twitter account, and or you can look for me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn name is Ignacio Gafo, and I will be very happy to keep on the discussion. All right. Thank you very, very much. Okay, I trust you enjoyed the lecture and wish you all the best. Thank you so much.